start with the basics, looking at seeding rate. So if you look at our seeding rate studies over the last couple of years, that optimal seeding rate, or that sweet spot, has been right in about 875 to 925,000 seeds to the acre. No, I did not misspeak. That's about half of what the recommended seeding rates are, right? So, the title of what we want to do here is doing more with less or doing less with more. Do we do more intensive management with less, that lower seeding rate? Or do we do less intensive management with more, that being the higher seeding rate? So what we've picked up on with the simple seeding rate studies is looking at consistency of that grain head, right? Consistent grain heads across the board, and oftentimes we get caught up in greater number of grain heads per square foot or per linear foot, when in essence, should we be looking at greater number of kernels, kernel size, etc. per head? All right. So should we maximize the management of fewer heads and get bigger heads with more kernels and bigger kernels, or do we do less intensive management with greater number of smaller grain heads? And that's kind of where this study then picks up. Seth Purucker is one of my master's students who just started this last spring. I'll hand it over to him, and he will talk about what you see in front of you. Seth.
So, hi, my name's Seth Purucker. Like Kurt said, I'm a first-year master's student under him, Dr. Kurt Steinke, in the Soil Fertility and Nutrient Management program. Behind me, you have one of my research projects. This is variety Jupiter. So as we go along in these treatments, keep in mind it's Jupiter. So Jupiter is a little bit shorter, not as susceptible to disease. Those are two of our inputs in our trial, so just keep that in mind. The planting date was September 22nd. On campus, it was September 20th, so not much difference. First off, I'll talk to you kind of how the plots are set up and how the trial's set up. So each pass of the planter is a different treatment. Each treatment has a sign in front of it. Okay. This is our first rep, so from me all the way down to that flag is different treatments. Then we have an alley of nothing, so where we let Weed Science do their stuff. Then we have rep 2, again all of our treatments, another alley, rep 3, an alley, and then rep 4. And then within each rep, each treatment is randomized. So treatment 1 isn't all the way down, it's just kind of random out in the field. That way we can represent, the yield we get in here to the yield you guys may get in your own fields. So this was set up as an emission trial design. What an emission trial design is you start with a combination of all of your inputs. So we have 6 different inputs, all in this plot. And then as you go down, you take one of those inputs out each time. Then we start with nothing for our traditional, so that's the doing more with less aspect of it, and this is doing the less with more. So we start with nothing and add one input in each time all the way down, and then we have to check. That way we can say, if we did nothing, what would we get? So in these plots, we mow the first 2 feet and the back 2 feet of the plots and only harvest the middle 5 rows. We only harvest the middle 5 rows, that way we don't get the border effect, because these plants on the outside have less interplant competition, so they're going to be a little bit taller, have better yield. And then we mow the fronts and backs of them because we take measurables that destruct the plants. So, for example, right here we did tiller counts, and there's no wheat there. So that definitely hurt our yield if, we took that into harvest. So we'll start explaining what the 6 inputs are in this study. We have seeding rate. The 2 seeding rates were 1.8 million and 900,000. You're probably asking, like Kurt said, why 1.8 and 900,000? We did 1.8 because we feel that's kind of what the industry is doing. Common practice, 1.8 million seeds per acre. Then 900,000 because past studies have shown us that seeding rate of 850 to like 925,000 is giving us that optimum yield. So we cut it in half, and that's why we had the 900,000. Then we have our autumn starter. So we use a product called MES. What that analysis is 12-40-0, 10 sulfur, 1 zinc. It's micro essential sulfur, zinc. So each nutrient is in each prill. So that's kind of cool. When we spread it, we know that all those nutrients are uniform on the whole plot. we went a rate at 250 pounds an acre. Another input is our spoon-fed nitrogen. Spoon-fed nitrogen, we went with 7.2 gallons of 28, which is like 21 pounds of nitrogen each week. So starting at green up, every 7 days we use streamer bars and applied nitrogen on the spoon-fed plots. We have Palisade, which is our plant growth regulator, applied at peak 6. We only did one application at the timing of peak 6. Again, because past research has shown us that that's the most optimal for us, is to use plant growth regulator one time at peak 6 and 2 3 the first node above ground, what we specified as. Another input is fungicide for sterile at a rate of 8.2, and Palisade for 12 ounces per way. So for sterile at 8.2 plus the surfactant, we applied that at flowering or peak 10. You're probably thinking, why peak 10, only one application? That's a little weird. A lot of people do 2, 3. Again, past research has shown us that one application at peak 10 has been most optimal for us in yield. And profitability, because we're also looking at profitability. And then our last input is high nitrogen. So we went with 130 pounds as our standard N. And again, past research has shown us that 130 pounds of N has been most optimal for us. And then we added 32% on top of that to give us 170 pounds. If I'm thinking that sign says 200, why not 170? Because that autumn starter had 30 pounds of N. However, when you're applying N in the fall, we don't account that at green up. Because, again, past research has shown us that applying N in the fall is not beneficial. You're not going to gain anything from it. So, yes, this does have 200 pounds, but our standard plus the high N is 170 pounds. So now we'll walk across, take a look at all the here. Feel free to interrupt, ask questions, raise your hand, shout, do whatever you need to do. So this plot is the intensive control, we can call it. It has everything in it. The low seeding rate, the autumn starter, the spoon-fed, the PCR, plant growth regulator, fungicide, and the high nitrogen. So then you take a look next to this, you have the same thing, all the inputs on a high seeding rate. So we're taking the low seeding rate component out of it. We have 900,000 seeds an acre and 1.8 million seeds an acre. So I have these two plants, and which one do you think is the high seeding rate? Anybody guess high seeding rate? Gary's right. So what we saw is the low seeding rate is a lot more bushy. Same number of tiller counts per square foot, but half the plants. Same number of heads, same height. Now, one difference we saw, though, was our head length. Head length was much longer on our lower seeding rate. I have some heads we can pass around. You guys want to pass around? So again, this is our high seeding rate. This is our low seeding rate in the intensive part of our trial. This is all white here? Yeah, the question was, is this all white wheat? Yes, it is all white wheat and variety Jupiter. Okay.
You whatever results you see here on white, similar with red, or is there enough variety here that genetically kind of practices might turn out differently?
So the question was, is this is white wheat, and we're also doing it on red wheat. Do you think there's going to be any differences in our inputs? Are we going to see different results? And I think yes. We have one of the inputs is fungicide between the two. I think a lot of people in this area go with 2 applications, if I'm not mistaken. We're only going with 1. Will there be a difference?
A piece of ground.
On this year, probably not. Our nitrogen is higher up here than it is on our red wheat. So that could make a difference.
Also, after that, you have the same study on red wheat.
Yeah, so we have the same study on red wheat on campus, same design, same inputs. Only thing different is our N rate.
How about variety differences?
So the question, that's a great question. The question was, are we going to see differences because we have different varieties? And yes, because we're using Jupiter here. Jupiter is a shorter plant and it's not as susceptible to disease as some of the other varieties are. Then we have Sunburst, on campus. That's a shorter plant. Actually, you can see to my right over here, that darker green, that's that Sunburst. So you can see right here the differences. A little bit shorter, so plant growth. Sunburst. Variety is Sunburst. So an input like our plant growth regulator probably have a bigger impact on our white wheat compared to our red wheat. The question was, at this stage, right now, today, do we ever think about weighing these heads? And we are actually weighing heads when kernels for head count and head length, but we want to wait until that grain fill period is over. If we take this head right now, it might not weigh as much as when it's mature, it might not be as long. You know, maybe the higher seed rate is going to catch up, so we'll wait and see. But those are all measurables we'll take. And the food fed, the high and all those other inputs.
Seth, will we also be running economics?
The question was, will we be running economics? And the answer is yes. We are looking at yield, quality, so we'll be running non-testing and falling numbers, and we'll be analyzing profitability of the intensive part and the traditional. So, like Kurt said again, are we getting more with doing less down there? Or are we getting less by doing more down here? So on all of it, we'll be running profitability. That, at the end of the day, is most important. How much money are you making? You know, the check might give you the most profitability. We don't know, but we'll find that out. I doubt it. So, again, to my left right here, we have the high seeding rate with everything in it at shorter heads compared to the lower seeding rate. Same number of tillers and same number of heads. So shorter heads with same number of heads when you're looking at the higher seeding rate. We go on to plot number 3 right here. This again is our intensive management plus everything. Low seeding rate, spoon fed, but the only thing it doesn't have is our fungicide. That was 8.2 ounces an acre again with the surfactant at flowering. One thing I want to point out, 48 hours was the start to the end of flowering, and we're targeting flowering. So you're a day late, that can make a big difference. Definitely when you're applying fungicide, we have to be careful. If we're doing it at flowering, we got to get it in that very short window. You know, if you have 200 acres of wheat, that might be hard. It rains one day, it's definitely a challenge when applying fungicide. Last week we really didn't see any head scab, but this week we saw some on campus, are seeing some here today. We'll pull some plants and kind of show you what that looks like if you're not familiar with it. So down to plot number 4, again, intensive management, low seeding rate, as everything that I described earlier without a PGR, plant growth regulator, applied at peak 6. So that's the first node above the ground, and we went with the rate at 12 ounces using Palisade. Now, really, there isn't a difference in plant height when we take that plant growth regulator out of it right now. We don't see any lodging in anything. However, those heads are getting bigger. This is grain fill period. So those heads are getting heavier. They're waving a little bit more. We may see some lodging in the next week or two. But as of right now, we don't see any lodging here or on campus. But that is one thing that we're going to watch for, do lodging ratings to see if that wheat's going to tip over or not. And we really haven't had that much rain or that many storms at this site. That could be another factor into why we're not seeing a great response from this plant growth regulator. And also, again, Jupiter is a shorter plant. It's not a taller plant. If we had a taller variety, you'd probably see a much more obvious difference in that plant height. So you guys can shift down with me as I'm walking along. So this is treatment 5. This is the, again, intensive management, low seeding rate with everything except our autumn starter. So if you look in this plot, besides this spot, this was again tiller counts. You see it's much shorter, less heads in the plot. If you look at this plot compared to that plot, it looks a lot thinner. Less canopy coverage. Heads, we will do head length, so I can't give you a definite, this one's shorter, but by the looks of it, it's a little bit scrawnier, not as fat. What this mess fertilizer, again, is that 12-40-0 plus 10 zinc and 1 sulfur. One thing you'll notice on the sign, again, it's 170 pounds of N, because that 30 pounds in the mez, we took out, we didn't apply it in the fall. And so we're only at 170 pounds, but again, on this 200, we don't really want to account for that 30 pounds that green up. So another thing, mez, there's the micro essential sulfur zinc, and each prill has all the nutrients, so when we're spreading it here on your field, wherever, we know that those nutrients are getting a uniform pattern. What mez is consisted of is ammonium sulfate, MAP, zinc oxide, and then elemental sulfur. So there's 2 different forms of sulfur in this mez, and that's mainly what we're looking at. You wonder why? Why do you have zinc and phosphorus and nitrogen in there? Well, zinc isn't very, wheat doesn't respond very well to zinc. So, yes, we're looking at our zinc level is actually high here at 5.4 parts per million. So we know that that's not responding very well. Anyways, sulfur is kind of in that, might be low range, is at 9 parts per million. Phosphorus was at 26 parts per million. Is that low or high? It's low. Critical level is 25 parts per million. Well, then how we know this isn't phosphorus response we're seeing on these plots? Well, we added a blanket application of P2O5 to everything at 100 pounds P2O5, so we know it's not that phosphorus, giving it the bushiness late in the fall and then early in the spring. So like I was saying, sulfur, there's sulfate in mez in our autumn starter and elemental sulfur. Well, what's the difference? Okay, the plant available form of sulfur is sulfate, but the natural form of sulfur is elemental sulfur. Elemental sulfur has to be oxidized into sulfate so the plant can uptake it. So the plant's getting that sulfate right away from the AMS, then the elemental sulfur added in is getting oxidized so later it's available to the plant. And again, you can see this plot, it looks really crappy compared to the rest. Shorter, not as many heads. Heads are a lot skinnier, a little bit shorter. So I think this one will definitely yield less than the rest of these. We go down to treatment 6. 6 again is the low seeding rate. Has all of the inputs except our spoon-fed nitrogen. So nitrogen still was applied to this, but it was all at green up at that standard rate with the high end, which would be the 170 pounds or 200 pounds and plus 30 from mez. So spoon-fed, why are we spoon-feeding? We want to see if spoon-feeding a little nitrogen each week can prolong that stay green period. So that grain or stay green potential, which would prolong the grain fill period. So are we going to get a longer grain period, bigger heads, more yields? Well, when you think about wheat, it has 80% of its biomass from F5 to F9. And if we're kind of prolonging that nitrogen, are we shorting that plant of nitrogen when it needs it the most? We don't know. Another observation we made is leaf burn. So our last application of spoon-fed was at flag leaf. You know, the heads were just about to come out. There actually been a plot or two that the heads were starting to come out, and we're putting nitrogen on. And yes, we're using streamer bars, but it's still over the top. Now, is that going to knock back yield because it's burning in the leaf? You know, that head is pulling everything from the flag leaf. If we burn it, you know, is that going to set back yield? We don't know. Maybe yes, maybe not. One thing that we've noticed is that there's much more flag leaf burn here than on campus with this variety, white wheat.